You're going to hear from a lot of different people over today and tomorrow. Democrats, Republicans, members of the Obama administration, and opinion leaders like Charlie Cook and Maya McGinnis. What I hope you'll take away from the next 2 days is that there's a lot more collaboration in this town than some would have you realize and some would have you think. You're going to hear a lot from me. You're going to get a great sense over the next day and a half of my philosophy and what motivates me. I would say I've got the best job in the world, maybe with the exception of being a U.S. congressman. And I want to introduce Ed Perlmutter and give him a chance to share his thoughts with you in that spirit.
I want you also to learn from one another. When I went through the bios of the group that you have assembled here, it is phenomenal. I mean, I'm just looking at the credentials of your group. You have journalists, you have radio personalities, you have photographers and engineers and actuaries and CPAs, world travelers, students with all sorts of community service. You got ecologists and environmentalists, professors and pilots, realtors and teachers, lawyers, which in my opinion you don't have enough lawyers in the group. You have doctors and nurses and miners and geologists. You have conservatives and liberals, authoritarians and libertarians. You have labor and business and farmers and ranchers, investors and traders, elected officials, military personnel. There's, in fact, you've got a spy in your bunch, a signal intelligence guy, and you have interpreters. I mean, you have a tremendous group, which is Colorado. And if you listen to yourselves and the conversations that are going to take place, you will learn a lot. You will learn a lot from your speakers, but you're going to learn a lot from each other. We do work together, and it makes us a much more powerful delegation. Our senators are great to work with. You know, working with Mark and Michael is just wonderful. And before them, Wayne Allard and Ken Salazar, because we're Coloradans first. Really, before party. Now, on national issues, we can fight like cats and dogs. But when it comes to Colorado-specific kinds of issues, whether it's dealing with Colorado Mesa University or CU or some issue out at DIA or something down in Colorado Springs, we really try to work together, and we're much more effective because we do that.
We have a couple things that I think we share with Colorado. One is energy development. And contrary to what you hear about this huge oil and gas play, which actually is also happening in Colorado. Colorado has an oil shale formation that will be developed much like North Dakota's Bakken formation. You guys can learn some things from us as we kind of work through that process.
What we need to do is ask our elected representatives and convince our elected representatives to support cutting spending and raising taxes. The absolute opposite of what people actually like to talk about in Washington. So my compliment to you is there's something about Colorado. And I don't say this to every group that I meet from different states, but the people I've met from Colorado have been terrific. I went out to do a town hall meeting with your two senators who were then stuck here. I don't even remember which last minute. It was like we were about to have a government shutdown. And it was a tremendous discussion. And I've met with a lot of groups from Colorado. So it's a really sincere compliment. It's been neat going to different states and talking with people, but there's something about Colorado. Budget reporters would call me all the time and say, you know, you run this responsible fiscal group, you must be outraged, budget deficits are huge. Actually, no. Budget deficits are supposed to be huge when the economy is in a downturn. That's one of the ways you deal with the business cycle. You have monetary policy, which the Fed does, and you have fiscal policy. And you don't have to balance your budget every year. You can have more flexibility when the economy is weak, which is what we had then, and then you bring back responsible policy making, and you bring back surpluses when the economy is strong, and you balance a budget more over a business cycle. Because we have this opportunity that we could put in place a plan, it wouldn't derail economic recovery. It would add a lot of stability by knowing what's going to be there. There's a lot of cash in the business sector sitting on the sidelines. There are a lot of small business owners who would like to be making investments or hiring. One of the most important things that we could be doing for the economy right now, creating jobs, but people cannot make those decisions with the lack of stability. We've got to find a way to tell our policymakers that they have to work together, because the notion of putting party and political points ahead of problem solving is going to really hurt this country. And we are at one of these moments where I think the decisions we face are absolutely critical for the course that we will be on, not just for the next couple of years, but for decades.
When I was superintendent in Denver, I didn't spend 1 second thinking about the application of a tablet in a classroom for a kid, because there was no tablet. You know, that was only 4 years ago. While I was out there, they had a slide that showed that 75% of their last 12 months of revenue was derived from products they did not sell 5 years ago. That's how fast things are changing. We have not addressed our tax code since 1986. You know, it's like we're living in the era of the telegraph. And what I know is our economy and the people in our economy will innovate, notwithstanding our fecklessness here. It just would be nice if we were able to actually help create velocity rather than drag people backward. Immigration is a very good example of that, by the way. You know, where we've turned our back on talented people from all across the world over the last 10 years, instead of saying, please stay here, please build your business here, please contribute your STEM degree, your math and science degree here in the United States of America. If we pass this bill, we'll be doing that again.
When I first got here, the well-armed security personnel didn't recognize me as a senator. They would look at me with kind of a blank stare as I approached the door to go vote, kind of as if to say the door for the interns is over there. I discovered after a while there is a shortcut to this ritual. I could use this little lapel pin, which the security personnel are trained to recognize as the mark of a senator, or the mark of a beast, depending on your perspective. I would point to it. I came to call it my sorry senator card pin, because I'd point to it and the security personnel would say, sorry senator, come on in. It worked most of the time. Sometimes it doesn't. This non-uniformed security guy comes up to me and says, will you please not lean on the senator's desk? I'm terribly sorry. It won't happen again. And he said, no, are you part of the minority leader's staff? And then I was like, oh, okay, he doesn't get it. So I pointed at the sorry senator pin. He still didn't get it. And so I said, I'm Senator Lee. And he said, what? My name is Mike Lee. I come from a state called Utah. It's sort of squarish, resembles a chair next to Colorado. And at that point, all the color drained from his face, and he said, I'm terribly sorry, my name is Steve, if you want to report me, and then he ran out of the room. I chased after him because I didn't want him to beat himself up over it, but he was too fast. So now when I pass Steve in the hall, I wave to him. I say, hi, Steve, just so he knows there are no hard feelings. Only until recently I realized his name's probably not Steve. I think it's Bob. Steve's the guy he worked with that he doesn't like. You know, sometimes we have to assert that which is rightfully ours. I didn't want to have to tell him that day I was a senator. I wasn't used to using my title, but sometimes you have to in order to not get removed from the chamber. And by the same token, sometimes as citizens we have to assert that which is rightfully ours, even when it's uncomfortable. Sometimes we do that as voters. Sometimes we do that when we tell our elected representatives what we want.
If we can get this comprehensive immigration reform done, and it's by no means clear, I think it may provide impetus for us to get into some kind of grand bargain on spending, on revenue, on taxes that we could enter into with the president. I have been working with him on immigration reform. We've had conversations about a grand bargain. I've even talked with him about Syria, and I think that the president is very interested in trying to work across the aisle and achieve some results here in his second term. He even took some of us out to dinner and picked up the tab. You know that that's a pretty significant sign. So despite all you hear about the bitter partisanship and how much I hate Mark Udall, the fact is that we have worked together on a lot of things, and I know we can continue to do so.
Senator Udall and I have been working on an idea. He's been sort of the principal advocate of a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution on the Democratic side. I've been a loud spokesman for the balanced budget amendment on the Republican side. And between the two of us in the last Congress, the Republican votes for the Republican proposal and the Democratic votes for the Democratic proposal together added up to 67, which is the magic number that you need in order to get something out of the United States Senate in the terms of a constitutional amendment. Our hope is that we can find ways to achieve that.
We're moving in very closely. In fact, we're in now the fire season in Colorado. We saw the devastation, Waldo Canyon fire, the Hyde Park fire that went through, the loss of lives, the loss of property, the impact on our environment. The legislation that I'm putting forward in terms of the Healthy Forest Management and Wildfire Act of 2013 is really going to be able to bring it back home.
Think about the successes that continue to flow out of Washington. The big challenges we haven't fully met. I'd be more than want to be more than honest with you to say that the big challenges that we haven't met, but I'm optimistic that one of them we will see a resolution to this summer, and that's immigration reform. There are a lot of businessmen and women in this audience. The business community has been asking us since the downturn in 07 and 08 for certainty, both in the capital and labor markets. Just think about, and I know there are different points of view here about immigration reform, but if we got an immigration reform package that really worked, secured the borders, provided employers with the tools to ensure that they're hiring people who have the right papers, and then brought people out of the shadows, most of whom are here pursuing their own dreams, think of the weight that would be lifted off our communities. Think about the opportunity cost today of the fear and the worry and the anger that is connected to an immigration system that's broken versus the sense of optimism, excitement, and happiness that would result if we were able to reform the system.